Zoltar Confederacy was built on a foundation of rigid honor, unwavering discipline, and the undeniable might of their warrior caste. Their society was a towering hierarchy where every Zoltar knew their place and their duty. When they encountered other species, they expected a similar understanding of strength and submission. Weaker species, in the Zoltar worldview, should recognize superior power and comply with the directives of the stronger. Fear, respect, and obedience were the natural order of things. Humans, they quickly decided, were a species ripe for such understanding. Individually, humans seemed fragile, prone to chaotic emotions, and their military structures, while occasionally clever, lacked the unyielding discipline of a Zoltar legion. When the Zoltar Armada arrived in the New Haven system, a burgeoning human colony on the frontier, they expected a swift surrender. And they got one, initially. The small colonial defense force was no match for Zoltar warships. New Haven's governor, a pragmatic woman named Maria Santos, formally capitulated to avoid a massacre. Lord Vorlag, commander of the Zoltar occupation force, was a paragon of Zoltar virtues. Stern, uncompromising, and utterly convinced of his species' inherent superiority. His carapace was a deep crimson, scarred from numerous campaigns, and his voice was a guttural rasp that demanded obedience. He established martial law on New Haven, his towering, heavily armed warriors becoming a common, intimidating sight in the colony's streets. He expected grumbling, perhaps a few minor acts of defiance that would be swiftly and brutally crushed, followed by the inevitable acceptance of Zoltar rule. Humans, he believed, would be cowed into productivity for the glory of the Confederacy. The initial directives were simple: curfews, resource quotas, and the integration of Zoltar overseers into all colonial infrastructure. The humans complied, albeit sullenly. Production in the hydroponic farms continued, the orbital refineries kept processing ore, and the colonial administration, under Governor Santos, relayed Zoltar orders. Vorlag was satisfied. "They understand their place," he reported to Zoltar High Command. Weak, but capable of following orders when properly motivated by superior force. But then Vorlag, in his infinite wisdom and desire to fully stamp Zoltar authority onto New Haven, issued Directive 734. This directive, intended to break any lingering spirit of resistance and demonstrate the totality of Zoltar control, ordered the public dismantling of the Pioneer's Torch, a much-beloved monument in the central plaza of Unity City, New Haven's capital. The monument, a soaring sculpture of abstract figures reaching for a stylized star, commemorated the colony's founders. Its components were to be reallocated for more practical Zoltar military purposes. To the Zoltar, it was a logical step. The monument served no practical purpose. Its materials could be useful. Its destruction would be a clear symbol. They expected perhaps some token protests, easily dispersed. They did not understand what that statue meant to the people of New Haven. They did not understand human spite. Governor Santos argued against it, of course, citing morale and cultural significance. Vorlag dismissed her concerns. "Sentiment is a luxury for the weak, Governor. The monument will be dismantled starting tomorrow by human labor under Zoltar supervision. That is final." The news of Directive 734 spread through New Haven like a virus. There were no riots, no open calls for rebellion. Instead, a quiet, cold fury began to settle over the colony. That night, in hushed conversations in homes, in maintenance tunnels, in dimly lit worker barracks, a different kind of plan began to form. It wasn't a plan for armed resistance. That would be suicide. It was a plan born of pure, unadulterated spite. The next morning, the human work crews assigned to dismantle the Pioneer's Torch arrived at the plaza. They were equipped with cutters, plasma torches, and heavy lifters. Zoltar warriors, armed with shark batons and particle rifles, stood guard, expecting trouble. The trouble they got was not what they expected. The foreman of the first crew, a wiry man named Jake Sparky Peterson, who usually maintained the city's power grid, approached the Zoltar captain in charge. "Honored Overseer," Sparky said, his voice carefully neutral, "we are here to comply with Directive 734. However, for safety and to ensure the delicate Internal mechanisms of the monument are not catastrophically damaged during disassembly, which could cause unpredictable energy releases, as per City Ordinance 34B, subsection Gamma, will need to begin by de-energizing the entire Central Plaza power grid. The Zoltar captain, Krelik, grunted. Unpredictable energy releases from a statue. Oh yes, honored overseer, Sparky said, his face a mask of earnest concern. The artist was eccentric, wove all sorts of experimental fiber optics and microfusion cells into the core for the eternal glow effect. Terribly unstable if not handled by the book. We wouldn't want an accident that could harm your esteemed warriors, now would we? Krelik, who knew nothing of human art or microfusion cells, but a lot about unexpected explosions, reluctantly agreed. The Central Plaza power grid was shut down. This, of course, also shut down the Zoltar Command Post's secondary systems, the automated plaza surveillance, and the public information screens currently displaying Zoltar propaganda. Annoying, but Krelik assumed it was temporary. The dismantling began, or rather, it attempted to begin. The plasma cutters, it turned out, had been accidentally calibrated to the wrong frequency for the monument's alloy, making them pitifully slow and prone to overheating. Apologies, honored overseer, the worker would say. These calibration dials are so sensitive, and Zoltar atmospheric pressure seems to affect them slightly differently. We're working on it. Each recalibration took an hour. Heavy lifters, when they finally got a piece of the statue detached, after it slipped twice, nearly crushing a Zoltar hoverskiff parked too close, found their guidance systems inexplicably glitching. They would move an inch, stop, require a full diagnostic reboot, which took another hour, and then move another inch. Damn solar flares, a worker would mutter, loud enough for the Zoltar to hear. Always messing with the fine electronics. We asked for shielded components, but budget cuts, you know. By the end of the first day, a single, small decorative finial had been removed from the Pioneer's torch. It had taken 8 hours and involved 3 minor electrical fires, extinguished with a suspiciously slow response from the human fire department, who cited unexpected hydrant pressure drops, and one contained hydraulic fluid spill that made a section of the plaza impassably slick for Zoltar patrols. Lord Vorlag was not pleased. Incompetence, he roared at Krelik. Are humans truly this inept? Krelik, his carapace dull with frustration, could only reply, They appear to be, my lord. They claim they are following all safety protocols to the letter. And that was the key. The humans were following every single Zoltar-approved regulation, every colonial safety bylaw, many of which were suddenly being rediscovered and meticulously applied, and every obscure clause in their employment contracts, to the letter, maliciously. The spite factor, as it would later be whispered among the humans, had been engaged. It spread beyond the plaza. Across New Haven, Zoltar directives were being followed with a new, infuriating precision. Resource quotas for the hydroponic farms were met exactly. Not a single extra gram of nutrient paste was produced. When a Zoltar officer demanded more, citing potential urgent need, the human farm manager, a kindly-looking woman named Agnes, would show him the signed quota sheet. Directive 212, paragraph 4, honored overseer, specifies this amount. To produce more would require a new, countersigned directive and an environmental impact assessment as per Colonial Regulation 77 Alpha to ensure sustainability. We wouldn't want to damage the farm's long-term viability, would we? The process to get a new directive approved took days, by which time the urgent need had often passed or spoiled. In the orbital refineries, maintenance schedules, normally flexible, became rigidly enforced. Sorry, honored overseer, the chief engineer would say, holding up a Zoltar-stamped operational manual. Module 7 requires a full diagnostic shutdown every 72 hours as per your own operational mandates. Yes, I know it's mid-smelting cycle for the high-grade natrium you requested, but rules are rules. Safety first. The natrium would cool and solidify, requiring days to chip out and resmelt. Zoltar warriors, used to instant obedience, found themselves tangled in human bureaucracy, weaponized. Requests for simple supplies were met with forms filled out in triplicate, with missing information in critical fields that required the Zoltar to go to 3 different colonial offices, each located at opposite ends of the city, and each closing for an unusually long sanitation break, just as the Zoltar arrived. Public transport began to run with agonizing adherence to outdated schedules. Yes, honored overseer, this bus is going to the garrison, but its scheduled route includes mandatory 10-minute stops at all 37 designated historic points of interest, as per the Preoccupation Tourism Charter, which was never formally rescinded by Zoltar Command. We wouldn't want to violate the charter, would we? Zoltar patrols found themselves on involuntary, excruciatingly slow historical tour of New Haven. The colonial communication systems developed intermittent signal degradation, particularly when Zoltar officers were trying to coordinate troop movements or report back to Vorlag. Human technicians would spend hours diligently tracing the fault, often involving the careful, methodical inspection of every single kilometer of fiber optic cable, while offering sincere apologies for the inconvenience. Lord Vorlag's command center, once a model of Zoltar efficiency, became a nexus of frustration. Reports were late, incomplete, or filled with irrelevant data meticulously compiled as per standing orders. His warriors were tired, not from battle, but from the sheer, grinding annoyance of trying to get humans to do anything in a straightforward manner. They weren't refusing orders. They were over-complying with them, finding every loophole, every ambiguity, every forgotten regulation to turn the occupation into a bureaucratic and logistical hell. The beauty of it was its deniability. No human was overtly breaking any Zoltar law. They were, in fact, often citing Zoltar directives as the reason for their infuriatingly inefficient actions. When Vorlag confronted Governor Santos, she would spread her hands in a gesture of helplessness. Lord Vorlag, my people are doing their best to adhere to all regulations, both colonial and Zoltar. Perhaps the transition period is proving more complex than anticipated. We are a people who value thoroughness. Vorlag knew, with a cold certainty that chilled him more than any plasma blast, that he was being played. But how? There was no open rebellion, no sabotage he could pin on anyone, just a planet-wide epidemic of weaponized incompetence, a passive-aggressive insurgency fought with paperwork, pedantry, and a terrifying, unified commitment to being as unhelpful as legally possible. The humans were willingly, almost cheerfully, running their own colony into the ground, making it an ungovernable quagmire, all out of what Vorlag could only describe as pettiness. Spite. The dismantling of the Pioneer's torch, which was supposed to take 3 days, stretched into its 3rd week. Only a quarter of it was down, and the surrounding plaza looked like a junkyard due to unforeseen structural complexities requiring careful on-site sorting of materials to prevent cross-contamination as per Environmental Protocol 9. Several Zoltar vehicles had been accidentally damaged by falling debris that human workers had tried their utmost to secure. The final straw for Vorlag came when a shipment of vital off-world components for his flagship's primary weapon system arrived at the New Haven spaceport. The human dockworkers, citing a newly rediscovered Zoltar import regulation, actually a mistranslated Zoltar quarantine order for alien flora, which they applied to the packing material, insisted on individually scanning and then incinerating every single piece of styrofoam packing peanut in the shipment before the components could be released. This process, they estimated with grave sincerity, would take approximately 6 standard weeks. Vorlag stared at the report, his mandibles working silently. His flagship, the pride of the Zoltar fleet, was being delayed by packing peanuts, because humans were following a Zoltar rule they had deliberately misinterpreted. He felt a sensation utterly alien to him, the urge to scream in pure, unadulterated frustration. He summoned Krellick. Status report on the monument. Krellick's voice was flat. My lord, today a crucial support strut was found to have a rare indigenous avian species nesting in it. Colonial Wildlife Protection Statute 42 forbids disturbing nesting sites. The human workers have cordoned off the area and are observing the nest for signs of fledglings. They estimate a 6 to 8 week delay before that strut can be safely approached. Vorlag slammed a fist onto his console, cracking its surface. This was not war. This was not rebellion. This was death by 1,000 paper cuts, humiliation by 1,000,000 tiny, perfectly legal acts of obstructive compliance. The humans weren't fighting them. They were annoying them into oblivion. They were making the occupation so costly, so inefficient, so profoundly irritating that the very act of trying to govern New Haven was becoming a drain on Zoltar resources and sanity. He realized the terrifying truth. The humans of New Haven were willing to bring their entire colony to a grinding halt, to endure significant hardship themselves, just to make the Zoltar occupation unbearable. They weren't breaking. They were making the Zoltar break. Their spite was a weapon more effective than any plasma rifle in this context. That night, Lord Vorlag sent a coded message to Zoltar High Command. It was a request for withdrawal. He cited unforeseen logistical complexities and severe environmental and administrative incompatibilities, rendering sustained occupation resource prohibitive. He didn't mention spite. He didn't know how to quantify it in a military report, but he knew it had defeated him. The Zoltar withdrawal from New Haven was as inglorious as their occupation had become frustrating. They left behind a half-dismantled monument, a crippled infrastructure that would take months for the humans to repair, which they began to do with astonishing speed and efficiency the moment the last Zoltar ship left orbit, and a profound sense of bewildered defeat. News of the New Haven incompatibility spread through the Zoltar Confederacy. Officially, it was a lesson in the difficulties of managing primitive colonial assets. Unofficially, Zoltar veterans of the occupation would speak in hushed tones of the spiteful humans, the species that would burn their own fields if they thought an enemy might glean a single grain of wheat from them. They spoke of a terrifying, passive resilience that turned Zoltar strength into a weakness. A new addendum was quietly added to the Zoltar War Manual under the section Psychological Profiles of Lesser Species. It was short and to the point. Subject: Terran humans, colonial variant. Assessment: display extreme capacity for collective, passive-aggressive resistance when core cultural values are threatened. Standard intimidation tactics may prove counterproductive, potentially triggering spite response. This response involves adherence to all regulations to a degree that causes systemic operational failure. They will willingly degrade their own infrastructure and quality of life to render occupation untenable. Caution: do not underestimate the strategic implications of human pettiness. Avoid direct confrontation over symbolic assets. If spite response is engaged, reevaluate occupation viability. Withdrawal may be the only logical recourse to preserve resources and operational sanity. The pioneer's torch was eventually, lovingly, and quickly rebuilt by the people of New Haven. It stood taller than before, a silent testament not just to their founders, but to the day they taught a galactic empire about the awesome, terrible power of human spite. And the Zoltar, for generations to come, would think twice before casually ordering the destruction of any human monument, no matter how impractical it seemed.